Welcome to another episode of Mr. Therapist and the Counselor Podcast. We are your guide to personal recovery, whether you're dealing with an addiction, a mental health issue, or you're just trying to figure life out. We empower your growth through raw conversations and demystifying the process of therapy. And we're the best freaking podcast, recovery, and mental health podcast out there. Jesse O.
This week we talk about the stages of grief and loss. We talk about loss in general, the end of the year. Maybe you've lost this whole year. This is what we're going to talk about.
Don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Share the show if you find some value. Here we go. What's up, man?
What's going on, dude? Here we go.
Here we go. Here we go. You do it better than I do.
Yeah. So, just getting through the holidays here, looking upon the new year.
He's just going to come out during the holidays?
Well, yeah, we're in December, dude. So,
I mean, when we're recording, we're in December.
I was we had a past. Yeah, this will come out during the holidays. But we had a conversation on one of the more recent podcasts. We talked about Matthew Perry, him passing away.
Yeah.
I actually got to finally, as I said, I don't have time to read no fucking books, but yeah. I actually listened to the audiobook. I listened to the entire thing. It was, I don't know if it's kind of morbid, but at times he was talking about, just when he was sharing, I was listening to a man that wasn't alive anymore. And it kind of stuck with me at one point in time. And I think he even talked about...
That sounds weird.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's just that, I believe he was 54 or 53 when he passed away. And when he even referenced being a 52-year-old man. Anyways, it's like, it's just like... So I think he even talked about like his life and possibly passing away from like his addictions, and it was just very I don't want to say eerie. I guess it was eerie in some ways, just to hear this man's voice kind of sharing like the things that he's missed out on in his life due to like addiction. But he talked about living in a home by himself, and that missed opportunity of not having like a wife or kids, and maybe he could still have that, but I'm hearing him talk about this, and of course as I'm listening to the audiobook, he's already passed away. So it really struck a nerve with me just hearing that, and impacted me. So I was really happy. I like reading, I love reading, but it was kind of, there was a power with the audiobook of just hearing his voice. And,
was he narrating?
Yeah, it was him. He was doing it, so it was quite fascinating.
That's so interesting. What's your, like, how do you feel around like the topic of death and like loss?
Well, that's what we're going to talk about today. So let's we could start up the clock right now. So how do I feel about talking about death? Yeah,
like you said, like sort of having that experience where you were listening to his audiobook and then you realized like he had passed, and it's like, you didn't realize it, but you knew he was passed, so you had that experience. Is that like a normal thing? You're kind of like...
I don't think about death a lot. I know some people are really okay. Like I've heard people say, yeah, I'm okay if I die or when I die. And I'm just kind of like, oh, okay. I mean, I don't try to put too much thought on it. There are moments like that I'll sit there and go, wow, to die would be to close my eyes, and that would be the end. And it kind of gets, if I start to kind of put myself in that experience, like it does create anxiety, just thinking that's the end of everything.
Yeah.
And where do we go from here?
Yeah.
So, but I think it's something that people don't really want to talk about too much either. Real quickly, I want to say that I had this client through our program I was working in, and she was in her late 80s, and she really felt a freedom in talking about death.
Yeah.
She said it. She said, I really think about dying and dying alone and not, just any missed opportunities. And I thought that was just so inviting to bring that up, bring that into the room, particularly where she was in that stage in her life. And I don't hear that a lot from people. And maybe because I'm not. Yeah, she was in her 80s. Yeah. So, and she was, going through some addiction, mental health stuff. And for her, and to be present in like a group, and she was able to just really be open about that, and it was very powerful to me. I don't know what anyone else's experience was, but just hearing that, and maybe because I don't work with an older population, I do and I don't, but and people are always knocking on death's door from if it's addiction and what they've done to their bodies. But to hear somebody just really openly share that, like, and I almost felt like there was this. I say it was excitement, but it was like just this freedom to finally say, hey, I'm scared. It's there, and I don't know if I'm ready. There's just a power with that.
Yeah, I mean, everyone has such a different experience with death and with loss, and I think sometimes it's uncomfortable to like hold space for that type of conversation, because not only as clinicians we have our own experience with it and our anxieties around it, but like, you know, you really have to like be careful to hold space for what that person needs, because experiencing loss and going through it like can look so different for people. Like, you don't know, some people need to cry, some people feel like they need to cry and they feel guilty that they can't, some people just need to talk about it, and it's one of those things, right, where it's like, how do you get better from something like that? Everyone has their unique journey.
Do you talk about it? Do you think about it? I mean, I don't know, kind of the same question you asked me.
I don't know. I mean, I don't think about it a lot, but
because you're 18 years old and you're just indestructible.
I'm 18, you know, I'm thinking about my mustache all the time. No, but I don't think about it too much. I do think about it, but in the way of like kind of like goal setting, like getting a direction, is like when I do die, like when I do pass away.
You're talking about your will?
Like,
am I in
kinda.
it? Yeah, okay.
Like, what do I want? Yeah, like, what do I want to leave behind? Like, you know, we talked about legacy a few episodes back, and so that's the way I think about it. But I don't get much. I mean, as we're talking about right now, I'm getting kind of anxious thinking about it, though. I'm like, man, but this doesn't usually happen to me. My parents are starting to talk about it a lot more, you know, because they're getting into their 50s and 60s, and they were getting into their 60s or 50, and yeah, they're starting to talk about retirement and death, and it's so, I don't know, sometimes it's...
You've heard of anticipatory grief before?
No.
The idea of just like, and I think this is probably more seeing somebody's like physical decline, but it could be other things. Maybe even invites this topic in the conversation, is like, if they start talking about it more, you start thinking about it more, you start beginning that grieving process of like, hey, my parents aren't gonna be here forever. So
I do think about that a lot. Yeah, so I do have that anticipatory grief. Do you?
You know what? Maybe I just don't think about it. I don't. Yeah. That's not true. I have thought about it with both my parents because they're both still alive. So I think about that. I think maybe I try not to put too much weight on it, because right now they both seem okay, you know, and I don't. Yeah. I guess I don't see them often. Particularly, I mean, I haven't seen my dad in like, I don't know, 10 plus years. Yeah. So I don't know what's going on. Yeah. The changes, but so I maybe I just don't put too much weight on the thought. But there are moments most definitely I'll kind of reflect, and I hope my mom is here for to see my daughter, you know, get bigger and older, and I can't imagine my life without her in my life.
Yeah, I lost both of my grandparents, like my grandma on my mom's side a while back ago, my grandfather on my mom's side a while back ago. I wasn't that close with them, more so my grandma than my grandfather, but towards the end I wasn't that close with them. But recently, last year, I lost my paternal grandmother, and I was pretty close with her. Yeah, and she, you know, I have like 7 aunts and uncles and my dad, so they're 8 kids. Yeah. And so seeing everyone just process the grief differently, and everyone's role as to like how they responded to this happening, you know, like, I mean, that kind of made me start to think more about like, man, my dad's getting older. Like, what, you know, I felt sad, definitely felt sad. I you know, with my grandmother passing away, but at the same time, I was like, okay, but she's kind of older. She kind of lived her life and experienced life, right? And then I look at my dad and I'm like, man, he's getting older. Like, I can tell he's like looking a little older. He's, you know, Dad, I love you if you're watching this, but you know, he's still a handsome man. But I start to think about that. I'm like, this is going to be really hard. My mom has an elderly care facility, and oftentimes we have residents who have dementia, and they'll start forgetting their family members, or they'll start like, you know, they'll kind of recognize you, but they won't be themselves anymore. So that, I mean, the thought of that happening is super scary. Like, kind of when you don't lose your parents still alive, but you kind of lose them, you know, because it's not them anymore. So I think about those things, and those things definitely do, like, I don't know, they bring up a lot of emotions.
That's a shift right there too. I like once again, that's the kind of that anticipatory grief, as you're seeing the decline of somebody. They're not who they were, what you remember of them, and we start to take that on. Before we go into like the introduction, just saying what the 5 stages or 6 stages of grief are. I said 6 stages. I'll explain why I said 6 stages in a few minutes here. But I wanted to ask you. I was just thinking right now, this is the holiday time. So as you're decorating your tree right now, and or just maybe hopefully your tree's already fucking up, but like,
do you start putting it up in December or after Thanksgiving?
Dude, I'm like, as the years go on, I'm like, put that thing up in October. Let's go. I don't know, man. I don't know. No, we put ours up at the very beginning of December. Okay. So, real tree or fake tree?
Real tree, dude.
Hell yeah, dude.
You gotta go real tree.
None of that fake shit. I love spending money every year on a tree that's gonna only last a month, dude.
The fake one is easier.
I'm not good with my money. Yeah. You know what's up?
But we digress, bro. We're stuffing down our feelings around grief and avoiding them by talking about other topics.
No, but I was saying, like, I just thought that was interesting. We're talking about maybe like a very heavy, dark topic, but this ties into like the end of the year, and I think that's a big thing as we start to reflect and we look back and we look out on missed opportunities. Some people might have like looked back at the year and been like, I've lost the whole year. I've lost out on experiences, or there's other things that, plus everybody has something that comes to an end. But I was going to ask you, when you have a client come in, how do you deal with a client, for you, your personal experience, that is dealing with grief and loss? And I think most times when I say grief and loss, I think most people will think of a death first, right? Death of a loved one. But there's other things that we could lose. We could lose a relationship. We could lose a job. Like I said, opportunities. People that are addicts, they're kind of losing that. They're losing their drink or their drug of choice, which is like a relationship in itself. So when somebody's sitting in front of you and they're dealing with grief, and something I've heard which really stuck with me from a guy named David Kessler, he said grief is as unique as your fingerprint, and everybody that goes through grief, they're going to experience it in a different way and how they cope. But how do you deal with somebody who's sitting in front of you who's just lost something or someone?
Yeah, I think like
and that's not fair to say like specifically, because once again, everybody's different.
Everyone's different. Yeah. So I mean, I think that's the first step, is just recognizing that that you just have to create a space, right? For a lot of times it's about the person processing, talking about the individual, like talking about what they're feeling. I heard someone talk about how it's such a sharp, it can be like, especially if you lost someone unexpectedly, it can be such a sharp pain, like intense and sharp pain, like someone stabbing you in the stomach, and like over the process of talking about it and time, like it starts to dull out a little bit, and you start to kind of learn how to live with missing that person. But there's a few things I think you go through helping someone talk and understand their feelings, right? And at some point you help them honor and how they want to continue to remember this individual. There's been times where I've helped people incorporate spirituality, and like, hey, this person is no longer here in body, but maybe they're still here in spirit. And how do you continue to connect with them and continue to have a relationship with them as you go on, and you could talk to them, you could write them letters, you could go visit them, there's so many ways that you can continue to maintain that relationship. So I think it really depends on just what they're presenting and what they're needing.
It's like I said, it's I'm just kind of wondering overall, like it is a lot of times with that, is it's a case by case, and you just got to meet them where they're at. So
I had someone not like a while back ago, I was working with grief. They actually they were going through recovering from like an infidelity, like they had cheated on their partner, and they were actually grieving the loss of like the affair partner. Like it was such an interesting dynamic, because you can't share that with anybody, you know what I mean? Like you can't share that with your spouse, your kids, that like there's this part of rebuilding the relationship with my partner, but also letting go of the other partner, and so it was a beautiful space to hold for them, because I'm like, hey, like there's nowhere else you can come in and talk about this stuff, and it's like normalized, and But in a case like that, like it's almost like what we did was like, let's write a letter to your partner, to your ex-partner, and like just say how you feel, say what feelings are coming up for you, and why you chose to do the thing that go the route you went, right? Why you chose to not continue with them and continue on with your partner. So that was very healing for them to like have those words and to sort of process like talking to this individual and saying goodbye. Yeah. So a lot of times it's that too, like setting up the scene to say goodbye to somebody.
Yeah. That's kind of tying in shame with loss and grief. So it's a
unique situation.
Yeah,
I was like,
unique,
this is like one of the first for me.
Yeah. So let's go through the 5 stages of grief and loss. The original model was by Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, and we'll just for those that don't know what it is, we'll just kind of lay it out there. But you have denial, denying that this has actually happened. Next would be like anger, which is a natural reaction throughout the grieving process. Next is like sadness and depression. Yeah. And as I've said before, maybe on the podcast, maybe I haven't said, but like a lot of times, anger is like sad's bodyguard. So and anger is that secondary emotion people talk about. Bargaining, which would be kind of like, if I would have done this, maybe this could have happened. Kind of almost like maybe sometimes people will just say to God, like, what can I do? Can I bargain something, right?
Take me instead. If I would have made this decision, they would have got sick, or they wouldn't. Yeah, for sure.
And then the last one is acceptance. Just kind of finding some acceptance, and that can be really challenging for people to accept, like that experience, that person, whatever it is, it's over. To really say this is the finale of something. So. It's hard to let go, as we see all the time, people we experience and talk with. So I mentioned David Kessler because he's a guy that worked with Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, and they recently added like a 6th stage. I mean, I don't know if it's like an official thing, but something he's worked with her. But he found out that with acceptance, sometimes there's a finality to it they really struggle with. But he brought up this whole defining some meaning in the loss from that experience. As you mentioned, that person that you worked with who was grieving the loss of the person he had an affair with, like, what was the point of that? Like, what was the meaning in that? Sure, he's maybe finding some acceptance, but like, what can he take from that experience, whatever meaning that was, and take that and use it maybe to better himself in a future relationship or his current relationship he's in. So
there's also, see if I can articulate this in words because it'll be hard, but there's also a loss. You said that you could lose people or you could lose things, like right?
Experience. So.
And I've worked with someone before who actually lost their job, and we had to help them really understand, because the losing of their job, it was almost like a reality check of like, man, I thought the world worked this way. Like, I gave so much to my job. I was always there on time. I did everything I needed to do. I went above and beyond, and I lost. They still let me go. And so I remember one of the things that we had to do was help them understand their values that they lived on. Like, they had some values that they believed in of like, if I do X, I will kind of be able to keep my job. And so something happened in the environment that shook those values up, and so we had to help this person understand, how can I reorganize my values to understand, okay, there's some things that are outside of my control. There are some things that, like, as much as I can do the best that I can, maybe someone doesn't value that. And so I think, as much as you do, and so you could still lose your job either way. And so I don't know if that makes sense, but like having to reorganize just kind of what it means, right? Like to be let go. It doesn't mean that I'm a bad employee, I'm a bad worker. It just means that, I don't know, maybe they're just doing a bunch of layoffs, or maybe I don't know, the boss was valuing some other job other than mine, right?
Well, a lot of times with a job, it becomes our identity, and then I know I get the sense like I feel like sometimes I'm unique, and there's nobody can do what I can do, and there's a part to that, a personality we have, right? But I've also kind of find some acceptance. We're talking about the stages of grief and loss, but acceptance in like, I'm replaceable. I don't want to say like if I passed away tomorrow, my daughter would be like, oh yeah, dad's replaceable. No, I mean, just saying, like, a lot of times though, like relationships or works, or it's kind of like we have to just understand the moment and the experience. And yes, once again, we bring some type of value because we are who we are. But we just hold on to some things too tightly. And so when something like that maybe to happen, it's just like, how could they? Like, how? Yeah, I used to think sometimes, like, how does this place function when I'm not here? It will continue to function. Or people will carry on. And once again, some losses are more heavy than others.
Have you seen the Mayans? You gave me that. You referred me that show.
Yeah.
Do you remember that?
The Mayans show is basically a spin-off of the Sons of Anarchy. It's
Motorcycle Club.
Yeah.
But it's like a Latino version of it.
Are we gonna talk about Opie passing away? Because I don't think I'm ready to talk about that.
No, bro.
Okay.
We're gonna talk about what's that detective's name?
I don't know.
He's kind of like a weird guy, but he's really smart.
Yeah.
But he tells Easy Reyes, he goes, like when your death comes, he's like, what helps me cope with that is to, like, in the grand scheme of things, like, we're just a blob. We don't really matter. Nothing we do really matters. And if you think about it, at some point, you're gonna be forgotten anyway. So
that's kind of depressing. But no, I will say this though. There are like, I remember this song years ago, and it talked about, like, it was from this punk band called the Vandals, but they're talking about, like, in so many years, like, nobody's even gonna, like, remember you at all. But there's some truth to
there's
that.
a way. So I
mean, unless you're in a book or something, like,
I think perspective, right? Like, what angle is gonna help you get through, like, the experience of death, grief, and loss? And for some people, like, it's like, okay, like, I get it. Like, it's going to happen to all of us. The world moves on. It's a part of the cycle. And for some people, it's important to know, no, I want to be remembered. I want to be, like, I don't want people to forget me.
Yeah, no, because while we're here on planet Earth doing some time, we want to be like, hey, like, I got to remember why I value this, because some people lose sight of that, and that's when maybe other mental health things will come up as a struggle. So
how we do on time?
Where I was gonna say, we're towards the end here. I wanted to just say, like, this is our end of the year podcast, and I think one thing that a lot of people will do before the ball drops is we'll reflect on time that maybe we lost throughout the year. We'll look at the good, but we'll probably look at the not so good as well. Looking back for you, do you see yourself, like, is there any lost opportunities? It doesn't have to be specific, but was there anything where you lost an opportunity to, and how do you, like, reshape that with the new year to come?
Yeah, for sure. I think
first of all, I just want to say that was a super deep question, and I know you were not ready for that one. What's up now?
I mean, there's a lot of lost opportunity. I feel like, I mean, you have to make decisions every single day, and every decision you make, you're choosing one thing over another. So you're always losing out on an opportunity when you select a different opportunity.
Yeah. I think I don't try not to get too stuck on that, because do you ever think about, like, what if I would have took this job? Like, maybe this could have happened. Exactly, or I could have met this person.
That's exactly what I'm saying. Like, I left, like, my job where you were working at, right? And I'm like, who knows what could have been?
Yeah.
But then if I would have stayed there, who knows what? I would have always wondered what could have been here, right? And so I think you always end up losing that. But there's some loss that you go better with and you're good with, and there's some that you're like, damn, like, I lost out on that opportunity. And there has been some of those, but how do I, like, reflect on that? I think I try to get better. I try to learn from it. I try to, yeah, for sure. I mean, acceptance I feel like maybe comes a little easier for me. I beat myself up, and then I'll be like, all right, how can you prepare for that opportunity? Right now I'm thinking of one in my head that, like, actually just happened, so like, I'm reflecting on that as I'm answering. But yeah, I think you look at what happened, you try to find a way to respond better, and then you kind of move on, and more opportunities will come. The fact that you had opportunities is indicative that more opportunities will show up in the future. So
that's nice, man. I kind of want to end on that, but I'm not going to. I want to say, like, one thing that I was thinking about this
time session sucks.
We're so bad at keeping the time. But I wanted to say, like, when I was thinking about this topic, I was thinking about the year, reflecting. Like, it's always so interesting and wild to me how, like, people come in and out of your life, and relationships change, and people that were there maybe won't be there in a year. So it's kind of like, it's really embracing the whole story, and the different chapters in your life. So, for those that at the end of the year, they start to reflect and maybe look back on, maybe they've lost some things that they can't get back, people in their lives. It's important just to talk to somebody. Just remember to always check in on your friends. If it's the New Year's Eve, Christmas Eve, whenever the holiday is. The reason I bring that up, because the first time I had heard about somebody, one of the first times committing suicide was around this time of year. It was New Year's Eve. I remember my mom sharing the story about this neighbor who took his own life. I don't remember the details. It's so vague, like looking back, and I think she was suggesting there was things with like drugs. People really struggle, and they look at the next year. Some people look at it as a new start. Some people don't.
Yeah.
They think it's an end. So it doesn't have to be an end. It could be the beginning of something. But if you don't talk to people, the struggle's going to be real with that.
Yeah. Good point, man.
Anything else before I shut this? Are we shut this down this week?
No, let's shut it down.
Okay. Happy New Year, everybody.